cancer diagnosis at age 29 was pretty normal
Yeah.
DC life, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was young, I was like traveling, I was, I had a great social life, I was working very hard. My job was like the thing that took up all of my time. I was like newly single, which was amazing. I was like loving life. I know what it is now, thank God, like after 29 years of living, I know what it is to choose happiness, right? Like that's something that you hear about a lot. Like people say happiness is a choice. I was finally beginning to understand that right before I got diagnosed. And so I told myself, I'm going to try to choose and be happy. So even though I wasn't happy throughout, like even though there were many times where I was sad or stressed out or feeling depressed, I reminded myself that this is like part of the package, and you can
Yeah.
still choose to. There are very few things guaranteed here, but hair loss is one of them. Like I know what's going to happen, and I have to find a way to accept it and to move on to the next issue because there's so many other things that are
Yeah.
hard to deal with, and I'm gonna try to not get caught up on this one thing. So even though I'd accepted it, it was still very traumatic to kind of go to bed and see clumps of hair, be in the shower and just get like, just like fistfuls of hair.
Yeah.
And then at that time, it was also very hard because my scalp became really sensitive.
I've noticed with this particular journey, and this is something
Mhm.
that's so impressive to me. I mean, the whole story is obviously incredibly impressive, but is getting featured the way you have in all these
Yeah,
different magazines and kind of getting your name out. I saw your interview with CBS New York, which is
yeah.
awesome. I was showing it to my wife, and I was like, "This is incredible. This is my cousin." So I was like, really, really, really happy to show you off. All right, cool. Hey, Sonia, welcome to the pod.
Hi.
So I know you and I go back. Obviously, you're my cousin, same last name,
Yeah.
but you're currently working on a really cool project called Style Esteem. So we're
Mhm.
going to kind of break that down, kind of get into how you got started, what you're currently doing with your website, and then hopefully get to learn maybe a lot more about you, your current journey into entrepreneurship, and kind of where you are with everything. So thanks for getting on. Really appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you for having me. This is such a important topic to cover. I think, especially now as people are having a chance to kind of revisit maybe even their own entrepreneurial dreams. I think this is a really awesome time to do this. Pardon me in advance for like the New York noises outside my window, even though
No, you're all good.
there
You're all
would be no
good.
noises at this point, but
Right, right, right.
we'll have a little music in the background for that.
So no, so we actually go back, right? So
Yeah.
so you and I are both from New York originally. So I'm in Houston now.
Mhm.
You're in Queens right now, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Back in
cool.
Queens. Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. So
Yeah.
you went to GW in DC, right?
Mhm.
There you studied poli sci, is that right?
So I went to GW for my undergrad where I studied international affairs and I
Okay.
concentrated in conflict and security.
Okay, got it. And
Yeah.
then I remember you were running a blog. I don't know if you were in college at the time or if you had just graduated. I think it was called the New York Mannequin or NY Mannequin. Is that right?
Hmm.
Is that blog
Yeah,
still up
that's
and running?
correct. So I actually launched that blog when I started grad school.
Oh, okay.
So that just happened to be the timing. So I think it was like 2014. I started grad school at Georgetown University.
Okay.
And at the same time, I started my blog. And so the whole idea behind the blog was just to kind of talk about how a New Yorker sees style in the District of Columbia. So it just was a little bit of a narrative, I guess, of my day-to-day life,
Okay.
being interested in fashion, but working in the government space and just how the two overlap or sometimes don't overlap and just my
Yeah.
thoughts about it. But no, it was something that I kind of created to explore this thing that I always wanted to do, which is fashion. And it's
Yeah.
always been in my life since a very young age. And I couldn't quite understand how I would be bringing it back into my life. And so I just started to like pursue different creative projects just to test things out. And so the blog ended up being more of a hobby where I got to do a lot of different things like photography, editing,
You were doing your own
writing.
photography? Were you doing your own photography or was somebody
For
else shooting
the
you?
for the most part, I mean, I did end up collaborating a few times with some up and coming photographers in the DC area where I modeled for them and they gave me amazing photos and it just was like a nice partnership. But
How did you find
um,
them? How did you find them?
um, you know, through Instagram, I think
Okay.
social media was like the way I connected with most of the people that I ended up meeting and sort of being in that network with. And there were a few like local meetup groups where um, a lot of creative types would come and gather and you would kind of just like help each other out. So there were a few of those in DC, but I think each city has those. I have found a couple in New York since I've moved back last year. So I mean,
Okay.
if your listeners are interested in the ones that I was involved with, I can send you some links.
Yeah, I think
Um,
I think that's always helpful because
yeah.
I think it's tough to figure out where you get started if you are going to start like whatever it is that you're going to start. So in the event that you do need a photographer, you do need to connect with people that you're like not exactly sure
Yeah.
where you're, and if you need them for kind of cheap too, right? Where you're like, hey, how do we do
Oh,
this so that it's
sure.
not like super so that it is cost effective? Because you go
Yeah.
hire a like photography like a
Hmm.
professional photographer, you're going to end up spending quite a bit of money, and that's
Oh,
perfectly
yeah.
fine. And some people should do that if you're trying to
Yeah.
depend, but it depends on where you are and what stage of the journey that you're in. If you're just starting out, maybe you don't need to invest several thousands of dollars in photography just yet. It might be a better workaround for that. So yeah, Instagram's definitely a good resource for that, no doubt, connecting with people.
Yeah.
So you end up doing that. So you end up running that blog for a little bit. You graduate. So you go to Georgetown. And what were you studying at Georgetown? What was your degree in there?
Sure. So I ended up at Georgetown because I was working in the legal field and I got to a point where I was like, I either want to go to law school or I want to do something else. And I
Yeah.
kind of I explored that idea of law school, and it ended up being that a lot of people in DC have law degrees that they don't use, and I thought I would have to
Yeah.
become one of these
Me.
people to
Yeah.
do what I
My
needed
brother
to do.
included. Yeah. My brother
Yeah,
included.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, so I realized, this isn't exactly the route that I want to go. I don't want to practice law. I want to talk about law. I want to talk about policy and about what the government is doing. And so I ended up getting into Georgetown and I studied public relations and corporate communications.
Okay.
And that was an amazing experience. And after that, I was able to really like pivot in my career. But funny enough, that's like around the same time all my health stuff started to happen, and then all this, the entrepreneurship eventually came about. But
Okay.
it ended up being like an investment in myself, because even though I didn't know it at the time, a lot of what I did study at Georgetown in the PR space is stuff that I can use to build my own company now. So
Yeah,
it's very nice.
that's always one of my like questions that I like to ask people too now is like,
Hmm.
was your graduate degree worth it? And I guess in
Yeah.
this case for you, it is. It has been so
Oh,
far.
yeah.
So that's
And
really
even
good.
the blog, yeah, even the blog, even though that's not something I'm like currently focused on or creating new content for, like all that stuff taught me how to take product shots, how to, you
Yeah.
know, how to arrange models, how to
Right.
kind of
I mean,
write and
copywriting
yeah.
and maybe some SEO work too kind of builds off of that
Hmm.
as well. So, so I guess let's get into it. So, like do you have, so you run into a series of health issues and you
Hmm.
go through some things, and that's what leads you down to the entrepreneurship path, right? So, do you feel comfortable talking about kind of what you went through health wise and kind
Oh,
of what happened in
absolutely.
that journey? So, awesome.
Yeah.
Great. So,
Yeah, it's a big part of it.
yeah,
Hmm.
so talk to us about what happened. So what was life like before you find out about your health issues, and then kind of when you find out, and
Hmm.
then that journey all the way through.
Yeah. I mean, life before my breast cancer diagnosis at age 29 was pretty
Yeah,
normal DC life,
yeah, yeah.
I was young. I was like traveling. I had a great social life. I was working very hard. My job was like the thing that took up all of my time. I was like newly single, which was amazing. I was like loving life. And then kind of all this like positivity also caused me to focus a little bit more on my family, and I was focusing on spirituality as well. And so I was kind of in a place, I think, where when this happened to me, when I got my diagnosis, it came about through not even a self-exam. It's just something I would say I accidentally found my lump in the
Okay,
shower.
okay,
So that's why I tell people to do your self-exam, especially
yeah,
in the shower, because you can maybe you can catch something early on, and that's definitely what happened to me. And so when I got my diagnosis, I had quite a few conversations with myself because I'd never had any kind of health issues before. Like I was perfectly healthy. Even given that I had cancer growing inside of me, I felt great. Like I did not feel any
Yeah.
kind of pain or anything different out of the normal.
So
But
when you feel that lump,
yeah,
like how much time goes by between you feeling that lump and then you going to your doctor to say like, hey, I think I want to get this checked out?
yeah. So for me, it was immediate. That might be a factor of my personality because I like to have answers, and so I was not going to let it go until I had my answer. And so, strangely enough, I actually found my lump when I was traveling to Atlanta um, for the Dar.
Okay.
Um, and so when I was down there, my parents were not actually down there. They were on their way traveling, and so when they arrived, I had a conversation with my mom, and then her former boss, who was also in Atlanta at that time, who happens to be an oncologist, who is like the only cancer doctor we knew, because we don't have any history in our family, so we don't really have like a medical team that it's like a go-to
Yeah.
for us. And so he was the one person that I could think of, and so we immediately reached out to him, and he saw me and basically just he gave me a physical exam and said, you're young, you don't have family history, you have dense breasts, so I wouldn't lose any sleep over this. Like,
Yeah.
I think he was just trying to calm me down, but he was like, I wouldn't lose sleep over this, but I will encourage you to get it checked out, and let me know what you need me to do. So I was like, yes, please write me a referral for ultrasound. Please write me a referral for a
Did
biopsy.
you have health insurance at this point?
I did. Thank God I did, because I was working for the government. And so I was actually in DC. So I traveled up to New York for every single exam I ever had. I never had a single medical appointment in DC because New York just seemed like the obvious place to do it because my family was here and the one
Yeah.
doctor I knew was here. And so
Yeah.
that ended up becoming a factor. So I was all of a sudden I was traveling all the time for chemo, for treatments, for surgeries, for everything. And so just how life changed is what you asked. And so when I started to go through that, I had conversations with myself about how I was going to go through this,
Yeah.
because this is like an outside force that comes in and like tries to take everything away from you, everything, like literally your time, your health, your looks,
Yeah.
your femininity, like your livelihood, everything. And I kind of had a moment where I was like, look, I know what it is now. Thank God, like after 29 years of living, I know what it is to choose happiness, right? Like that's something that you hear about a lot. Like people say happiness is a choice. And I was finally beginning to understand that right before I got diagnosed. And so I told myself, I'm going to try to choose and be happy. So even though I wasn't happy throughout, like even though there were many times where I was sad or stressed out or feeling depressed, I reminded myself that this is like part of the package, and you can
Yeah.
still choose to be happy, even if you're depressed, even if
Right.
you're,
When do you
you
get to
know,
that? When do you get to that stage? Because I imagine that,
mhm,
like the night before your diagnosis is like
mhm,
confirmed, or right after it's confirmed, and those initial conversations start happening with, I guess, your
mhm.
oncologist, right? I imagine there's a lot of fear in that time, right? So how do you go from like feeling super fucking scared, probably,
Yeah.
I'm assuming, right, to
Mhm,
then feeling like I'm gonna choose happiness? Like, what is that? Like, how do you chart
mhm.
that journey?
Well, I think something that you realize when you go through cancer diagnosis or any kind of very life-changing health issue at a young age, and I think what's going on right now with COVID-19, I think a lot of people are very uncomfortable because they're coming to terms with this very
Yeah.
thing that I'm about to describe. You realize that your mortality is a very real thing. So all of a sudden you're like, hey, a lot of us kind of waste time. And I used to do this all the time, waste time being unhappy about X, Y, or Z, things
Yeah.
that don't matter at all. Um, you know, and then when this happens to you, you're like, wait, I actually don't have unlimited time to be miserable. So
Right.
I'm going to try
Yeah.
and like, I'm going to try and respect my time and the time that I've been given on earth by
Yeah.
honoring it with a smile and with some strand of positivity and hope.
Yeah.
Because that's the truth. I mean, how would you feel if, you know, you lived for like, you know, let's say till 80 years old, and you spent a majority of that time being very unhappy and stressed out. It's like,
Yeah.
you're given this life to enjoy it, to create something,
Right.
to live and to
Right.
explore. And I decided, I was like, hey, look, I actually don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to just practice a lot of gratitude. Like
Yeah.
anytime I have the chance, I'm going to do it. Like I
Yeah.
don't care if it's nearly impossible, I will find something to be grateful for.
For sure.
And
And I think,
that
yeah, and I
helped.
think like a lot of people, I know, like I keep hearing that like some of the people's like best years are in their 60s, like as they like 60s
Mhm.
and then older, because they just feel more liberated and happy. And I
Yeah,
guess they're getting closer to their own mortality, so they start realizing
yeah,
that too. You've kind of got like a 60-year or like a 40-year jump on them now, right? Because you
yeah,
were hit with that way sooner and way earlier in
absolutely.
life. So that's, I mean, in some ways, that's deeply like profound that you got
Sure.
that lesson super, super, super early.
Yeah.
D- during the so are you I guess right now are you currently cancer free? Is
Yes,
that how
I
that
am.
works? Is it so you go through a series of, I guess, is it chemotherapy, or do
Hmm.
you go through chemotherapy treatments, and how many treatments did you end up having to go through during your time?
So the treatment protocol, I guess it's very dependent on what kind of tumor you have and like the stage of your disease. And so for
Yeah.
me, I was early stage, and so because when you're younger, your disease tends to be more aggressive, and so basically my oncologist was like, I'm going to throw the kitchen sink at you and like do everything we can to make sure you have the longest life possible. And so started with an ultrasound and a biopsy, and then once it was confirmed, I started chemotherapy. And so I got my diagnosis in like March or April of 2018, and then chemo started in May, and it lasted from May till August 31st of that year. And there were 6 rounds of treatment for which I traveled back and forth from
Okay.
DC to New York. And with each round, you sit there for hours and hours. I would be there for like 6 hours sitting in a chair hooked up to a machine that was just pumping me full of toxic medicines. And then you would be in recovery for at least 1 week before you can be normal again,
And what
at
was
least
that
for
like?
me.
What was the like?
Um,
Were you able to? This is gonna sound like a weird question, but when you get out of there, and I think at this point you've, I think, made the decision that you're gonna be like consciously trying to find more happiness. Time is finite.
mhm,
So when you get out of chemo, like how are you balancing that feeling of saying,
sure,
I want to get out there and I want to start feeling happy again, but maybe feeling kind of, I guess, miserable going through the chemo? Because I think it's pretty
sure.
taxing, right? So what is that
Oh,
process like?
absolutely. Yeah, I would say, to in all honesty, that's like probably the worst part of the entire experience is doing the chemo. And I'm not gonna lie, like when I would leave the hospital, I would feel like I have nothing left. I would feel like I just felt like an empty body. I didn't feel like I had any kind of heart or soul. It was very hard to leave the hospital and go home and kind of entertain the now what question. And I think that's okay. It's okay to
Yeah,
feel like you don't know what to do. It's okay to feel like, you know, helpless. It's fine. That's
yeah,
normal. Be I would feel strange if you didn't feel that way.
right, right, right.
But then, you go home and you kind of go into your routine of, okay, I'm now going to rest. I'm now going to look after my body. I'm now going to eat. I'm going to drink water. I'm going to sleep a lot.
Yeah,
And in that process, you begin to realize, hey, I'm really grateful that I can eat organic apples, that I can afford organic apples. Or,
yeah,
I remember getting nauseous quite a bit. And like, I never really spent time with my dad during the day at home because I would always be in DC during the day. And, even if I was here, he would be at work. Like, there
yeah,
was just no overlap of us hanging out during the day. But there were times when I'd be recovering from treatment and he'd be right there and he'd be like helping me when I was like, you know,
yeah,
getting nauseous and like
yeah,
cleaning things up after me. And I was like, wow, like how blessed am I to have this?
yeah,
And so little
yeah,
things like that, even in the moments where you're like kind of feeling crappy, there's so many things that are like, you don't realize how blessed you are to have those
For
things.
sure. And I think having that perspective definitely helps too, that you're able to kind of
Hmm.
appreciate the fact that you now get this time and you see it that way too. During the recovery process from chemo, was there anything that you would do that would help you recover faster? Were there like certain foods that you would eat that would make you feel better? Was it getting extra
Hmm.
rest? Like kind of was there anything that you were like, okay, after going through multiple rounds, I think you said you went through 6 rounds, right? Um,
Hmm.
was each round totally unique, or were you starting to see like, okay, there's a pattern to this, there's a behavior to this, there's like a way that I can
Sure.
optimize so that I can kind of recover a little bit faster?
Hmm. Yeah, so I just to go back a little bit, so I went through 6 rounds of chemo, but I actually had 1 year of active treatment. So chemotherapy lasted from May to August, but I continued maintenance treatments, which are administered the same way through infusions for the next 1 year. So I was actually in active treatment for what turned out to be over a year. And
Okay.
so during that time, the chemo is like the hardest part. The active treatment is like a walk in the park compared to chemo. But with chemo, it's tough because I didn't have someone guiding me through it who had been through it themselves, and so I was just kind of learning how each treatment is going to end up impacting me as it was happening.
Yeah.
And so the first treatment is, it happens. You have a few days where you're not feeling well, and then you recover, and you're like, wow, I feel like myself again. But then you have the next one, and it takes longer to recover, and the next one, and by the end, it's like the side effects are very compounding, and so until you completely stop chemo, at one point, you just feel the same kind of down, like,
Yeah.
energy and health
Yeah.
state. So for me, what ended up helping was definitely going for walks. Like, people often ask, how can I help someone who's like going through chemo? Like, what can I do for them? And I really like the idea of maybe someone just showing up at my door and being like, look, I'm coming in like a half an hour. I want to take you around the block. Let's like
Yeah.
go for a walk, and that makes
Yeah.
a big difference to feel like you can kind of be out in the world, be normal, like you can
Yeah.
walk, you can exercise, get some fresh air. That's always helpful. I started to be very, very cognizant of like being outdoors because it was summertime. So putting on sunscreen is very, very important because your skin is extremely sensitive and prone to burning at that time.
Yeah.
Staying hydrated, things like coconut water. A lot of people, I didn't drink this, but a lot of people tout Gatorade during that time. So things that are very hydrating.
Yeah.
Um, and just like I really turned to carbs quite a bit because like that's what my stomach enjoyed eating. So like I would
Yeah.
always have like a bag of pretzels or crackers. Like I had crackers in my nightstand. So like if
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wake up
Yeah.
and I'm nauseous in the middle of the night, I would pop a tablet for my nausea and I would have some crackers and I would go back to bed and I'd be okay.
Yeah.
So sometimes you'll find yourself reaching for things that are like heavier or maybe what you used to think are unhealthy, but like you need to gain weight at that time. You need to like keep your energy up and
Yeah.
totally just go for it. Whatever helps you feel better and helps get food into your stomach.
Yeah.
That's important.
No, that's super sound. That's super, super sound advice. Because I know that there are people in our community, and there are people
Mm-hmm.
that are obviously going through it. So I think it's like good to know too that like
Mm-hmm.
chemo is going to be really hard. I think your doctors probably prepare you for it. Also, I think sure they give you a lot of advice too. But I think it's really brave that you're kind of doing this and that you're kind of putting yourself out there and kind of talking about your journey so that people can kind of maybe even circle back with you potentially, but at least know that there's somebody out there who's kind of gone through a similar journey. And I think you find like solidarity in that. I think you find like I'm not completely alone. I mean, obviously it's your journey to travel, but at
Yeah.
least you don't feel like you're entirely alone going through it. So you're going through this like tremendous. I mean, it's almost impossible to put it into words, like as somebody who's observing it, right? Versus you going through it. When do you decide to say, a, I'm going to start my own company and I'm going to start my own business, and that's Style Esteem. So when did Style Esteem get started, and what was sort of the direct inspiration for that?
Sure. So Style Esteem was, well, like we mentioned before, like I had this dream to like go into fashion and that had always been there, and I kind of was always outside of that space wondering how I'm going to get in. And um, I kept that alive inside of me, even though I ended up doing all these other things in DC and all this other education. And so when treatment started, I got to a point where, my doctors did prepare me quite a bit for what to expect medically, but there were a lot of lifestyle things that no one really told me about. And hair loss was a big one for me, where I had no idea what to expect again. And so, like, my hair, I went for my first treatment, my hair started to thin. And before you knew it, I couldn't even, like, tuck my hair behind my ears without getting, like, a clump in my hands. And
Yeah.
even though, like, in that conversation of being happy, like choosing happiness, I decided early on, I was like, look, there are very few things guaranteed here, but hair loss is one of them. Like, I know what's going to happen, and I have to find a way to accept it and to move on to the next issue, because there's so many other things that are hard to deal with, and I'm gonna try to not get caught up on this one thing. So even though I'd accepted it, it was still very traumatic to kind of go to bed and see clumps of hair, be in the shower and just get, like, just like fistfuls of hair.
Yeah.
And then at that time, it was also very hard because my scalp became really sensitive. And that's something that no one warns you about, because when your hair is falling out, your follicles are dying off, and your scalp becomes like, it almost feels like your head is bruised, and it's hard to even lay down to bed and put your head on a pillow.
Was it tough to see? Like, I would imagine that going through the stuff internally is already really hard. Getting pumped with all that toxic is really hard. Was it?
Yeah.
Would you say it was, like, I don't know if it was comparable or more difficult or less difficult to see your hair falling out? Like, was that like its own kind of pain for you, or were you like, no, this is just like, whatever, it's coming up, I don't care, I'm not going to let it impact me? Or was it impacting you? Were you feeling self-conscious about it at all? Was any of that running through your head?
Yeah, I think the hair loss, it doesn't matter, like, how grown up you're going to be about it and, like, accepting. Like, at the end of the day, it's such a big part of your identity that when it starts to change, it's like, it's almost like a giveaway, right? Like, oh, your hair is falling out, you must be sick. Like, someone can look at you and say, like, you're going through something. I don't know what it is. Like, I don't know if you're a cancer patient or some other thing is going on with you, but there's something wrong with you. And so I think that was the hardest part, because I was doing my best to deal with it on my own, but then, like, to have this physical change where now it's like it's on everyone's radar. And so it was really tough to kind of do that, because I'd also chosen to not talk about it when I was diagnosed. I chose to go through it kind of privately and come out with it later, because that's what I decided is important for me and my family. And so it was very hard to kind of manage all of that, because I wanted my privacy. I wanted to just kind of deal with it. And so that was really tough. And, to see the hair come off, it just was like, it was such a strange experience, because I felt like when I saw myself bald, it was like the rawest vision I could have of myself. It's like me just with my face and nothing else, kind of distracting even myself from my own expressions. So so that was like a big kind of emotional thing. It turned into, like, also how to deal with it in an outward sense with people around me that didn't know what I was going through. And then eventually I realized, like, hey, hair loss is pretty painful, and wearing a wig is just not really an option for me anymore.
Because of the sensitive scalp at the time, right?
Well, it's a sensitive scalp, and also, for the most part, the drugs that a lot of women get kind of create issues with, like, internal temperature, so you get a lot of hot flashes, and you're already sensitive to begin with, and so a wig is just like, it gets very hot, very itchy, very scratchy. And it honestly, for me, it was like, hey, I am in such great discomfort right now. If there's something I can change to just, like, automatically improve my state of being, I'm gonna do it. Whether that's like taking the wig off, whether that's like just wearing, more comfortable shoes, like not prancing around in stilettos all the time, something like that. So it became one of these things where I was like, okay, I'm over the wig. Like, it looks cute on me, but I want to be comfortable. I'm commuting so much. I'm traveling so much. Like, how can I fix this? So that's when I started to look online for head wraps, and I couldn't really find anything that I connected with. Everything was either really boring or looked really gaudy and loud, like something only a cancer patient would wear.
Yeah.
And then even beyond that, like all the women that I saw wearing the head wraps, I couldn't relate to any of them. None of them looked like me. None of them were brown skinned or, like
Yeah.
curly haired, or I just couldn't connect with any of it. And I bought a couple of pieces, but they didn't make me feel empowered by any means. And so I actually started to visit a fabric shop next to my infusion center in Astoria. And each time I'd go for chemo, my mom and I would walk over there afterwards. And we'd pick up a few yards of cloth. And in the 1 week period that it would take me to recover each time, I would just sit on the couch. I would eat, I would sleep, and I would sew. And I came up with these styles that were pieces that I could like match with my outfits. They were
Yeah.
comfortable. They were like
Yeah.
stretchy. I felt like I could be out for a few hours in them, which is an amazing thing to say, because I remember like I only saw one movie the entire time I was in treatment, and it was an Indian movie, and it was like 3 hours long, and I would have never done that if I had to wear a wig. I
Yeah.
went to the theater
Yeah.
and I was wearing like a patterned head wrap, and it was matching my dress,
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, I was like, I feel great.
Yeah.
I'm gonna sit here, I'm gonna
Dang,
enjoy
you went for a
myself.
3-hour Indian movie. That's the first thing to start getting back into it
Yeah,
as a
it
way to
was.
do it. That's brave.
I know.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So you end up designing, and did you have experience sewing beforehand? Did you know how to do that, or did you learn for this particular project?
Um, I'd I'd sewn kind of like on my own time. I would do my own alterations
Yeah. Okay.
at home, but I never really sewed kind of like pieces from scratch. And with this, with the head wraps, I didn't know how to do that. I definitely researched into it and did a
Yeah.
lot of like experimenting before I could kind of figure out what works.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like, you know, a process of its own.
So you start making these for yourself. You start designing them yourself. You start picking fabrics that you feel like are comfortable, that you can wear for a long time, that don't, I guess, heat up as much, that are maybe a little bit
Mhm.
better at maybe kind of letting air come through, more breathable, I
Sure.
guess. And so where do you go from that to saying, hey, now this is no longer just something I'm doing for myself. I think I can
Mhm.
maybe produce these and can actually sell these. So how do you kind of go from making it for yourself to then taking it to that next
Mhm.
step?
Sure. So one part of it is that I'd always wanted to be in fashion, right?
Yeah.
And I'd been looking for a way to make that happen in my life. Another part of it is like when you choose happiness, it's I think you touched on it before. You were like, oh, you're choosing to see certain things around you when you're choosing happiness, and I believe that as well. So when you are choosing happiness, you're also open to receiving happiness, and that was a part of it too. Like I was in a state of mind where I was thinking about how am I, like, what is gonna kind of pull me out of this space and into the next one.
Yeah.
And another big part of it is that I was searching for my why, right? Like I was searching for my purpose to get through this, because to me, I knew that this didn't happen to me for no reason. Like
Yeah.
I knew that my story was going to help other women in the future, and I just didn't know how yet. And so, just combining like all these, you know, different convictions that I had, I said to
Yeah.
myself, hey, like I needed this thing when I was going through one of the hardest times in my life, and it wasn't out there.
Yeah.
But I've created it, and I benefited so much from it, and now I think it's time to help other women do the same. And through my journey, I realized, not just is breast cancer getting younger and younger, which is goes completely against any kind of medical, opinion, like standard opinion that, oh, breast cancer only happens to you later in life. No, there's so many women who I've met who are even younger than me who have gone through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so to kind of empower that group of people, and then also just women at large, because it honestly doesn't even matter what age you go through it. Hair is a big part of your identity, and the desire to feel attractive and well dressed and feminine never leaves you. Doesn't matter what happens to you, right? And so
Yeah.
I wanted to help women who are going through one of the hardest things they'll ever go through something that has always given me joy, which is fashion.
Yeah.
And so when I was coming to the end of my treatment, or coming to the end of my chemo in August, I had already started to put ideas together, of creating some kind of a brand. And then I started to explore different ways to go about it. I looked at nonprofit. I looked at, like just company structure, and I realized like giving back was really important to me. Just making that a part of my
Yeah,
brand
yeah,
values. And
yeah,
yeah, and so I considered doing a nonprofit, but then I realized like I actually just want to create a brand, and then within that brand, I want to do a donation program. So
yeah,
at the same time that I was thinking about creating a brand where women can shop for head wraps the same way they shop for clothes, which is by season and by occasion, because that's just how we dress ourselves. I also wanted to create a space where I could donate one head wrap for each head wrap sold, and so I kind of built that into the company, and kind of put all of that out together,
yeah.
and that's just been, the recipe from the beginning.
So I've so you go from there, and then I guess you start designing by style, by occasion, and now you're saying, okay, I'm going to start, and for everyone that I sell, I will donate. So I guess you decide to put this on a website. You decide to put this on your own store, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
styleesteemshop.com. So I actually have it up. So let me go ahead and share the website with everybody so they can kind of see it. So give me
Sure.
one second here. Are you able to see it? Are you able to
Yes,
see
I
my
can see
screen?
it.
Okay, cool. And so are these all women on here as well? Cancer survivors or people going through cancer as well? Or are these or is it just
Sure.
people in general who just like the head wrap?
Sure. Sure. So all of my models are one of three types of women. They're either cancer survivors, which is any counts as anyone who's heard the words "you have cancer."
Yeah.
They're previvors, which is anyone that has a predisposition to cancer but has not been diagnosed yet, and they're carevivors, which is anyone that has looked after a loved one going through cancer. And so they're survivors, carevivors, and previvors.
Yeah.
And I wanted to include women of all backgrounds because you know what, like all these people matter. Everyone who is on here has been touched in some way by cancer, whether it's like their mom had it or they had it, or
Yeah.
whether they've gotten
Yeah.
like prophylactic surgery for it. And so
Yeah.
that's been an important thread for me. And just so every woman you see here on the website is someone who has had that experience.
Wow. And how did you get connected with all of these women too? It seems like they're all different backgrounds. So how did you
Yeah,
guys get connected?
sure. So a majority of them are women that I met after diagnosis, and I met them through a couple of like local organizations. There's one group called the Breasties, which is like an organization, a nonprofit that focuses on young women who have gone through reproductive cancers. There's other organizations like Young Survivors Coalition, like other places where I've kind of looped myself in, and kind of let people know, hey, I'm doing this. I want to empower anyone else who's out there kind of in the shadows, because that's where I was, right? Like I wasn't
Yeah.
out there in the open. I was kind of like on my Instagram, like looking up hashtag breast cancer, hashtag like post chemo hair, like all these things where I saw other women who were posting about their journey. And even though I didn't make contact with them because I wasn't ready for that yet, seeing
Yeah.
other people out there who had gone through it was like a lifeline to me. It was like so important. So all these women who are already kind of converging around different groups and different issues, I just kind of introduced myself as someone who has also gone through it but wants to kind of create something that pays it forward. And so that's how I ended up meeting these people. And a lot of women learn about me because I got some of my friends to repost into their own groups and kind of ask people
Yeah.
to model for me, or get involved and do interviews. And so it's
Yeah.
just also a little bit of word of mouth too.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to do it all on my own.
Fair
That
enough.
wouldn't work. Yeah.
And so the other thing that I've noticed with this particular journey, and this is something
Mhm.
that's so impressive to me. I mean, the whole story is obviously incredibly impressive, but is getting featured the way you have in all these
Yeah.
different magazines and kind of getting your name out. I saw your interview with CBS New York, which is
Yeah.
awesome. I was showing it to my wife, and I was like, "This is incredible. This is my cousin." So I was like, really, really, really happy to show you off there. And it's
Yeah.
so I guess kind of walk us through that, because I don't think most today, and I think this is maybe a good e-commerce
Mhm.
entrepreneur-based question for a lot of small businesses, is kind of the journey to getting featured into something like this, and kind of what steps you took, and what was the first major publication, and then kind of how did that become like because it seems like it might have been one or two that picked up, and then now more people wanted to talk to you.
Sure.
So can you kind of walk us through that?
Sure. I think getting featured is such a there's so many things that can potentially go into it.
Okay.
I will say this much, like in my heart, I was like, okay, I would love to be out there. I would love to be on TV or in magazines and all this, but I will be honest with you, I did not actively pursue it from that angle.
Yeah.
What I've done is I've kind of sought out partners within the space. So partners that I want to kind of, get matched up with where I can keep doing what I'm doing, but on a bigger scale. So one really important thing, I guess, from the CBS interview is that I never planned for that. It's not something I was seeking out.
Yeah.
It's not something that was like on my list of like, okay, this is a goal. How that happened was I ended up partnering with the Coleman Foundation here in New York and becoming a power ambassador for them for their Race for the Cure last year. And it's something that I saw, they were doing this with a number of young people who were using their platform to kind of raise awareness within their communities and to get people involved and to fundraise. And what I thought to myself was, hey, I'm already doing Style Esteem. I'm already like New York Mannequin. Like people know that I'm into this kind of stuff, like especially within our community, within the Smileys. I was like, hey, why not take it a step further and really get people involved? Because I know for a lot of people, their involvement with me is like looking at what I'm doing, but I'm like, hey, why not get you actually physically there with me, walking the race, raising the money. And so that was my goal. And I reached out to the Coleman Foundation. I was like, hey, like I want to get involved. What can I do? And so they kind of signed me up, and then it just became this idea of, hey, like this person is so young, they've gone through this and they're doing these other things. Let's talk about that. Let's like put a spotlight on that. And that's how the CBS thing came about, because that was through the Komen Foundation. And so I was doing what I thought was the right thing to do and something that, made me feel good to do. And it led to other opportunities. And so I would say involve yourself with other organizations, with other bloggers, people or influencers in your space who you can just grow from. Like I learned so many things from the Coleman Foundation during that time. That was the first time I'd done a head wrap partnership where I named a wrap after Coleman, and I did some fundraising with that wrap. And that was a growing experience for me, and that was all I was looking for. But it turned out to like give me all these other things back in return. So I would say just focus on your brand, focus on growth in like an authentic way, and people pick up on that versus like pitching is fine. I'm not saying it doesn't work. But you want people to come to you almost in that way where like you put yourself out there and what you're doing is so special that people are interested in that versus, the other way around.
No, for sure.
That's how it's been for me. Yeah.
And then so you do that interview, and then do you see an uptick in like website visits, traffic, things like that, or does it not really translate into like sales or anything? Is there like a relationship there? Because you did so well in that interview, and I think what you're talking about coming off like organic and like it was awesome. I mean, if people haven't seen it, they should definitely find that interview, because you do a really good job of kind of explaining the brand and kind of your journey a little bit. It's obviously not as long as this, but yeah, you do a really good job on like a national scale and on a national stage, where you probably might have been a little bit nervous. So yeah, I guess kind of walk me through that. What were the nerves like when you were kind of preparing for that interview? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, it's so funny because it was like such a surreal experience. I don't know if you remember from your days in New York, but Cindy Shu, the lady that interviewed me, is like a household name in New York. And to have her like in my parents' living room, like, talking to me, petting my cat, like asking me about my head wraps, I was like, this is just, life is pretty amazing. Like, this is crazy. So that was, that was my first interview. So I just wanted to make sure that, that I can connect with someone out there who needs it. And afterwards, I was really happy to see that. Yeah, it did. I think it did have that effect, because I did get some outreach on Instagram, people sort of messaging me,
Yeah.
That they saw my story and like they're going through it and just like they feel encouraged by what they saw in that interview. And
Yeah.
I did see also an uptick in sales, which is something that I think is interesting because it was my first experience where I did something and it resulted in a lot of sales, and I
Yeah.
I didn't know what the after effect would be, if anything,
Yeah.
and it was a positive after effect. But then I realized, like, anytime I do get involved in this type of thing, I need to make sure that I'm prepared to kind of deal with the outcomes. And so,
Yeah.
making sure certain things are in stock, making sure I have like packaging ready to go, like all these sort
Yeah.
of things. Just being prepared on the logistical side is really important.
Yeah.
And then also, I would say just beyond like media hits, another thing that's really important, like once the interview airs, it's aired, right? And unless it re-airs or someone retweets it or something, like that's kind of like
Yeah.
it's happened,
Yeah. You've had your spike, and then now it's kind of returning back to maybe a normal, right?
right.
So
And so I would say like keep things like that on your website so anyone who's visiting you can kind of see what you've done,
yeah.
and get to know your story a little better. But I would also say what's really important is to like create content that is like your own content. So creating
Yeah.
blog posts talking about issues in your space that no one is talking about, which is
Yeah.
something, it's been a big thing for me because there's so much that I didn't know about when I went through it that now I'm like, okay, I'm going to talk about all these things because
Yeah.
it's like really important, and I
No,
know
for
someone
sure.
can use it. And so creating content like that where you can continue to talk about your brand, but also kind of flex your muscle as an expert in your
Yeah.
space, I think is very valuable too, because that's another thing that ties back into pitching is like when you reach out to media and they want to see, how legitimate you are, they can go and see, okay, not only are you legitimate, you're an expert and you're
Right.
worthwhile doing an interview with and kind of bringing in, and putting on that stage. So
Right. No, absolutely. And so you mentioned the logistical issues potentially from like an
mhm,
uptick in sales. Are you currently fulfilling everything yourself? Do you have like a fulfillment
mhm.
partner that you're currently using? What is that process like? It's a little more into the weeds of the
Sure.
business itself, but how do you kind of handle that?
Sure. I do everything myself. Everything that you see is like goes through my hands.
Yeah.
So I do have, we do have some partners with like boutiques and online platforms that cater to women going through cancer, and so like a lot of our products are on those spaces, to kind of reach women that are already in that community. And so we're in a lot of different places other than our website, but
Yeah.
for orders and for anything that's created, I do everything myself.
So I had mentioned that I currently saw some of your products at Nordstrom as well. So uh, how did you kind of find your way into Nordstrom?
Yeah, Nordstrom was um, just such an amazing opportunity to be able to work with them, because it wasn't just me and Nordstrom. It was actually the Georgetown Lombardi Cancer Center in DC, and so it was kind of all three of us working together. And the way that happened was, I actually connected with someone at the cancer center who um, is on the women's committee that throws various events throughout the year, every year, to raise money and awareness for the cancer center. And just being an alumna of the school and also being a survivor, I was able to just kind of get involved and to meet the other people who were working on these issues. And one of the big partners and sponsors of this committee is Nordstrom. And Nordstrom has a very long history with supporting breast cancer patients. And through funding as well as through fashion, and so they basically invited me in to kind of keep doing what I'm doing, right, but in their
Yeah.
space, and to kind of, yeah, bring my head wraps into Nordstrom during the holiday season, but at the same time, like, raise awareness and to kind of get information into people's hands.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what it was. It was a combination of head wraps, but also just anyone who came to me for a head wrap also got to learn a little bit about the cancer center. So
Yeah.
that was really a cool thing to be able to do.
So
Yeah.
the fact that you have to make like a fall line or like a winter line, are you Are you making new designs every season now, or are you now saying like, hey, I know which designs are working, and these are the designs that I'm going to stick with now year over year? Kind of what's that process like in terms of adding new designs, retaining existing designs? Kind of where are you with that?
Sure. So we definitely add new styles every single season because I'm sure you might know from your experiences with your wife, she's not just going to pull out her same like
Yeah.
holiday dresses every
Yeah.
year. She's
I
going to
mean,
mix
we
that,
had this one
you know.
funny conversation where she's like, I
Uh,
think I'm gonna try to shop in my closet, or I'm gonna
yeah.
shop in my closet, is what she was saying.
Yep.
And just because I think right now she didn't want to go out and buy new clothes because she can't really wear them anywhere. So I think that's like the
Mm,
only time I've ever heard her use that phrase.
yeah.
Otherwise, you're right. It's like you got to find something
Yeah.
new, or you're looking for something new, season over season. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the idea, right? Like you might have a lot of, you might have like maybe a certain number of pieces in your closet that you really love that you're going back to them all the time and they look good on you no matter what, like they're the right color, the right fabric, and the pattern is something that's like you're always in like a good mood to wear, and so you're going to wear that all the time. Doesn't really matter,
I'll
but at
take
the
your word for it. Yeah, I have no way of. I mean, I wear like a black T-shirt everywhere I go. So yeah. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with men, it's like you might have like the one or two ties that you really like, or the
Right.
shirt,
Right.
like that's the
Right.
right shade of blue that is like always gonna look good on you.
Right.
So it goes both ways, but like at the same time, we do have occasions that come up. We do have, sometimes we're like, oh, I'm in the mood for something different, or I want to wear something new for, this milestone or whatever it is, because you know life never stops, and it certainly doesn't stop for you when you're going through cancer or hair loss. And so you might end up going through a holiday season where you're like, I have all these wraps from the summer and from the fall, and like I just honestly I want something a little bit more glitzy, a little bit more glamorous, because
Yeah.
I am going to a family holiday party and I want to dress up, because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
my right to dress up, and I want to. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
for that reason, it's like, really important to just always have something a little bit new, something a little bit fresh. The classic pieces will always be there. There's certainly certain styles that I know people love, and I hope to never get rid of them.
Yeah.
But I always want to have something new for people who, are going through hair loss. Hair loss lasts I mean, the hair falling out is just one piece of it, because when it grows back, it's not really at a place where you're totally comfortable for a
Yeah.
while after it starts to grow back. So you might be
Yeah.
experiencing multiple seasons, multiple, you know, occasions and milestones in your life while you're still trying to get to a happy place with your hair. So
Yeah.
having something new for people who kind of have that prolonged need is really important to me, just so you feel like, you can come and shop for something and find something new that makes you smile, and
For sure.
just like you would for any other thing in your closet.
For sure. For sure. I mean, I think it's like just overall really incredible, like this whole journey, everything that you're doing now. Is this something that is like full time for you? Is this something that you're doing on the side while you're maintaining another professional career? Kind of where are you with Style Esteem today? How much time does it take?
Sure, sure. So I decided that when I was going to move back to New York, which was about 1 year ago, March 2019, I moved back from DC to New York.
Yeah.
And at the time, I wanted to take a few months off just to kind of recover and to like just get right with myself and like enjoy just some downtime in my life,
Yeah.
after working very hard and going through treatment and all that stuff. So during that time, again, like I'm not someone who can like stay in one spot for too long, and so I started to use my so-called downtime to just really go hard with my business, and
Yeah.
it turned into something that I started to live, breathe, and eat for like most of the hours out of any given day, and that's still how it is right now.
Yeah.
I'm working on it constantly, and so something that it wasn't intentional to do it full time, it turned into that because I realized, especially in the beginning, I'm blessed to have that option, because this is kind of the most crucial time for my business, and
Yeah.
I have my family support. I can kind of, I don't have any other outstanding needs where it's like, oh, I have to have a job right now. So I am doing this mostly full time. Recently, I started to actually teach at Columbia, so I'm doing that part time. But
Oh,
it's
hey.
it's like
Okay.
a small piece of my journey as well.
Yeah.
And that's been a really nice balance with my company because I love the academic space. I love being in an environment where learning is going on. And
Yeah.
so that's been a really nice thing to be able to do.
What are you
But
teaching
that's
at Columbia, by the way?
sure. So I'm teaching in the Strategic Communications Master's Program,
Okay.
and it's a number of different topics. So this semester, the class is called Public Relations and Corporate Communications.
Okay.
Last
Yeah.
semester
You
we
know a lot
did,
about that. Yeah.
yeah. So it's really interesting how life comes full circle, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a lot of the same things that I studied during my time at Georgetown. So it's
Cool.
topically is very similar.
Cool. I mean, I think that if I think when I hear your story now, I think it's like one. I feel like when I don't know, I feel like experiences in general kind of give you like tools, and they give you like
Yeah.
things that you have that maybe other people don't have. So I think that you kind of experiencing what you experience gives you this incredibly profound perspective, and I think we're all kind of lucky that we get to learn from it. You know, and we get to kind of
Yeah.
just like borrow it. You know what I mean? Maybe like kind of
Mm-hmm.
hopefully appreciate
Yeah.
that, because I think I really like what you had to say about happiness. I think that's something that'll kind of stick with me for a while for sure. And I think that like I've lost somebody close to somebody in our family had passed away from breast cancer, so it's something that we've been intimately familiar with for a while too. So to see
Yeah.
you uh, uh, doing so well, and see you just kind of thriving and really just kind of embracing it for what it is and getting through it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's a forever journey. I don't think it just stops, right? Like
Yeah.
I think you're still probably going through follow ups and things like that. And I think it'll always kind of be there with you. So I think it's unbelievably inspirational that you ended up starting this company, and the fact that hopefully lots of people see this. And I don't think your head wraps are only for people that are going through cancer. I think they just look beautiful in general. I mean, I'm not going to wear, I can't, it's not, but I do think that lots of women could probably, or people that are into head wraps could definitely
Mm-hmm.
participate, and that you'd be serving a really good cause, and
Yeah.
one would be being donated as well. So that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I just wanted to say thank you so much for getting on and just kind of talking about your journey and kind of sharing some of your experiences with us. I know a lot of people. The person that we ended up losing was actually had a very similar story. You know, had cancer at 29. So a very, very similar journey, slight differences,
Yeah.
obviously, because every story is very unique or whatever. But
Sure.
I do think that anyone, God forbid, going through this can kind of resonate with what you're going through, and I think that you're providing an inspiration to them, and to even people that are not, who are just kind of maybe sitting around and like angry or upset about nonsense or
Yeah.
focused on some bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, stop. You know, there's more important shit going
Yeah.
on. You know, so
Yeah.
thank you so
Absolutely.
much. And like I said, we really appreciate you getting on. And I'd definitely love to do this again too. Like as you start getting like bigger and bigger, I mean, you're already
Sure.
huge, but as you start getting bigger and bigger, and maybe kind of walking us through more of your journey and kind of where you are, maybe in a few months or a few years or something, that'd be really cool too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the sky's the limit. So I kind of feel like there'll definitely be things to talk about, and I can't wait to see like all the stuff that you do with this amazing platform.
Yeah.
You're
I mean,
a fantastic
I
interviewer, by
don't,
the way.
I don't know where. I honestly don't know what the hell's going to happen with this, because
Yeah.
we've been interviewing people from all backgrounds, and everyone's
Yeah.
just got some crazy stories and really really
Yeah.
interesting stories, and like they're presenting it in really really cool ways. So I just hope that
Hmm.
like my thought process was always like, I just want to talk to people doing cool shit. I think that's like my opening line to
Yeah.
a lot of people too. It's like, yeah, and I think you're doing some cool shit, so let's talk. And I think
Yeah.
I mean, you're doing some really cool shit. You know, I mean, it's like it's really 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 yeah, it's inspiring as fuck. So I really do appreciate it. And yeah, I think we'll get the story out there, and we'll hopefully get more people on Style Esteem also. And I think when you start raising funds again, are you going to be working with the Coleman Foundation again next year? Is it like a recurring thing, or was that like a one off, and then you'll decide
Yeah.
again?
I hope to be working with them again this year. I think we're all kind of waiting to see what's going to happen as
Yeah.
far as like the race for the cure goes, just because of
Oh right,
the
right.
health situation. But yeah, I'm sure whatever happens, I'll be there to support.
Cool.
So yeah, I'll definitely let
Yeah, so
you
we'll all
know.
donate. Yeah, we'll all hopefully try to donate to that link too, where you're raising funds
Yeah.
this year, or if there is a race this year. But I'm sure there's going to be some sort of round for raising funds or whatever. So let me know when we get
Yeah.
closer to that. We'll blast that also. But yeah, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it, and
Of
we'll touch
course.
base soon.
Well, just one
Oh,
one
please, yeah,
other piece. So um, definitely when I'm partnered with them, like I'd love to promote it as much as possible.
yeah,
Um, and till then, or rather like year round, I'm also there's also a place on our website where someone can sponsor a head wrap donation. So
okay,
like you said, like yourself, you're not going to wear a head wrap, but like if you still feel like, okay, I want to donate something, you can sponsor a donation. And so you don't, the one for one is great, but like some people don't have a need for a wrap and they don't
yeah.
particularly want one. So they can still sponsor a donation if they wish.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
maybe if you want to drop a link or something like that to
Yeah,
that space.
definitely, definitely. I'll do that. I'll do that when I post this video as well. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Good point. It's,
Sure.
awesome.
Yeah,
All right, thanks,
absolutely.
Sonia.
All
And well,
right.
see you. I'll see you when I'm in New York. I'll probably be there. I mean, I was supposed to come down for my kid's first birthday. I was going to try to come down,
Yeah.
but that's not happening now. So,
No.
but I'm sure I'll be in New York sometime this year. So when I am, I'll definitely hit you up.
Yeah. Whenever you do, please, we'll definitely have to get together.
100%. 100%. All
Sounds
right,
great.
Sonia.
All
Talk
right.
soon. Bye.
Take care. Bye.